But then, if I'm so suspicious, there's nothing really strange about me knowing about you. Or is that wrong? Just shut up. He didn't want to hear such things. Konoe clenched his fist and felt a sharp prick. Instead of using his sword, Konoe wanted to strike him directly with his claws. When he sensed Konoe's anger, Fury took a step back. Oh, scary. Anyway, don't you want to know more? Like, maybe about that bracelet from earlier? The bracelet. When Konoe's expression changed, Fury laughed in triumph. He jumped off the ground and sat on a branch slightly higher than Konoe. You want to know, right? That bracelet made you see and feel something strange when you touched it. Fury made a gesture towards the offending object. You might have already noticed, but what you saw were someone's memories. His memories. Memories? Yes, of the bracelet. Fury threw something down from the tree. It was a pendant. It was a little bit ornate, but was considerably old. Touch it. Fury shifted his feet and tilted his head. I said, touch it. Or are you scared? If that's the case, don't do it. I won't force you. Konoe knew he was being provoked, but he was still angry. He half-heartedly reached for the pendant. His heartbeat pulsed as soon as his fingertip touched it. Again, this feeling. It was just like with the bracelet. The same sense of confusion, the reckless driving of his heart and body, the headache. Unable to stand any longer, Konoe fell to his knees. Another memory. In his head, a memory began to play. This time the image was of a room, but it was dark and unclear. The image shook, felt like he was in a fight. Suddenly, a shadow covered his view. Breathing felt painful. He couldn't breathe. Konoe gritted his teeth and endured it. His mind became numb, and a high-pitched sound rang in his ears. Just as he thought he couldn't take it anymore, a strong sensation surged through his thoughts. I'm going to be killed. Konoe opened his eyes wide. He grasped the pendant tightly in his sweaty hand. Konoe turned his gaze overhead, his shoulders heaving as he panted. Fury smiled slightly and stared at him. Did you see it? Fury leapt off of the branch. There was a girl who loved that pendant, but one day, bandits broke into her house and killed her. You saw it from the pendant's eyes as it swung against her chest. Every little detail of her life being crushed out of her. You shared a glimpse of that memory. The memory of a murdered girl. The suffocating feeling returned in his chest and Konoe furrowed his brows. He was able to see the memory of these objects just by touching them, but I've never experienced something like that until now. Besides, what could he gain from the ability of seeing memories of objects? Empathizing with the emotions of others to this degree was difficult to deal with. The shock he felt when he watched the memory of an object felt the same as when he empathized with others. Konoe didn't need any more of this burden. Fury smiled mockingly at Konoe. Is that so? It's a newly awakened power of yours. Power? Yes, it was inevitable, I suppose. First off, it isn't something you can use as you wish. However, Fury began to walk around him in a circle. His tail shook every time he stepped forward. It won't happen with everything you touch. Only things imbued with strong emotions built up over time will let you view their memory. Furthermore, you won't be able to skip the bad parts. In other words, Fury stopped and stared defiantly at Konoe. It's the same as empathizing with the emotions of others. Just how much did Fury know? Konoe felt like his fur was being rubbed the wrong way. Cat jokes. The power to read memories of distant times. It may seem like a coincidence, but it isn't. Your body isn't either, by the way. What do you mean? What do I mean, you ask? Eri shrugged. Don't kid around. How much do you know? Tell me everything. Nah. Won't it be boring if I just tell you? Life's way more fun when there's highs and lows, right? Your beloved ancestors were the two Canes, yeah? Weren't they like that too? Even though they feared and they suffered, they still traveled to dangerous places and fought. Right now, you're full of mysteries. You don't know what to do. But go ahead and worry, suffer, struggle. Someone is interested in watching you. Watching me? That's right. Always watching you. Someone was watching him. Konoe shivered. A trial. Just think of this as a trial. A trial? That's right, a trial. Please him to the utmost. If you don't, you might just die. What do you mean? Hey! Fury kicked off the ground before Konoe finished speaking and jumped onto a high branch behind him. He put a hand on his chest and theatrically lowered his head. I only came to raise the curtain on this stage. Konoe, it's been a pleasure. See you. Wait! Konoe followed him and began to climb up the tree. However, Fury's body rose into the air. Fury twirled elegantly and curled his tail, then vanished into thin air. That's a nice trick. Konoe stared at the shaking branch in disbelief. Konoe, that's what he called him. Fury knew his name. His enemy knew about him. It was like someone was leading him by the hand through this series of events. His anger rose. Entertain him? What a joke. Why did he have to go through this? For what reason? Why? Konoe gritted his teeth and raked his nails against the ground with all his might. He didn't know why he was giving in to his anger, but he was unable to contain himself. He raised his arms and clawed furiously at the surrounding trees. He wanted to tear it all apart. Damn it! Whenever his nails dug into the trunks, he felt an indescribable emptiness in his heart. Konoe wanted to tear apart that emptiness. He clawed at the trunks and tore the leaves. So salty. After raging for a while, he finally stopped. He crouched down and breathed roughly. Konoe's heartbeat had slowed down, but he was assaulted by an intense self-loathing instead. There wasn't any point in being so violent. It was useless. But it was unforgivable. Even if it was all just coincidence, he needed to settle this. But Konoe knew it wasn't so. There was someone responsible for his hopeless situation. He didn't know if that boy, Fury, was telling him the truth or lies. He knew there was someone else involved. Until now, he had resolved to leave his hometown and nearly died. So then, he wouldn't forgive anyone involved in this. Konoe sighed and looked down to his hands. His nails were torn because of his temper. He licked over his hand to soothe it. As he did so, Konoe remembered the emptiness he'd felt when he raged a while ago. After all, he couldn't do anything but move forward. If he stayed and let his anger fester, nothing would change. There was no other choice but to keep living. It was a feeling unlike surrendering. No, not long ago he would have thought of this as giving up. But something had changed in Konoe. He wanted to discover the true nature of the person driving him into this. He would find him and tear him apart with his claws and fangs. Therefore, he had no choice but to move forward, even if he might fail. Feeling a new flame burn inside him, Konoe stood up. He cast his eyes to the pendant. He grabbed it by the chain and looked at it at eye level. After seeing the memory, he didn't want to handle it carelessly. Konoe quietly put the pendant near the bracelet. He cast his eyes between the two. When he saw the memory of the bracelet, Konoe felt the presence of someone in agony. The presence was fresh. Maybe the person had been here recently. Not even a day seemed to have passed since it had been tossed aside. He'd touch it once more. That was the thought that crossed his mind. Even though there would be agony once more, just thinking about it made his ears lower. But maybe he'd find some clues. After hesitating, Konoe took a small breath and made up his mind. He held his hand out to the bracelet. His trembling fingertip touched the surface lightly. His heart raced. He felt himself being pulled back into the whirlpool of torture. Putting a hand against a tree trunk to support his body, Konoe concentrated on the image that began to form in his mind. The green light scattered and the image cleared bit by bit. Something like clothing was reflected in the edge of his vision. His presence. It was definitely a cat. On the move. Before long, a small puddle entered his field of vision. It was the place where Konoe was now. Then the image of a large bag appeared. He couldn't see it clearly, but it seemed to be filled with lots of different things. The image shifted in and out of the bag several times, then the view moved slightly. Then he saw the ground. For an instant, he saw something like the hem of a coat. Something chased him, but then the memory cut off. He let go of the bracelet. Konoe exhaled when he was freed from the pain. He raised his head and looked back at the puddle. The owner of the bracelet seemed to have passed through here. He should go that way too. Konoe lifted his bag and began to walk after checking the position of the moon of light. Konoe threaded through the grove. From there, the scenery continued on and on, just like a maze. The moon of light had set and colored the clouds red, and the moon of shadow floated in the sky. As night fell, he started to worry that he'd been walking in circles. Once lost, he would never leave. He knew what they had meant now. As Konoe walked carefully to avoid the void, he saw a large tree ahead. Its trunk was larger than those of the other trees, and its roots sprawled over the ground. It looked like a good place to rest, and it also was that place you were at earlier. He felt his tail had been hounded with fatigue and thought that soon the rest of his body would be too. Konoe debated whether he should rest now or not, but feeling like he was just recklessly advancing, he decided to rest among the roots for tonight. Approaching the tree, Konoe sat down to hide himself. He breathed in the cool night air and exhaled slowly. Konoe listened carefully in the silence. He could hear odd cries and noises. The scent of moist earth rose strongly from beneath his feet. He didn't know what could happen next. Konoe dozed off until morning came, then scanned the surroundings with his ears. The second morning in the forest, Konoe's body creaked when he stood up. He'd scrunched his body up into awkward positions, so he didn't feel rested. He slowly lifted himself from the base of the tree roots. He had a faint headache, but he stretched out and shook it off. After he finished grooming his arms, ears, and tail, Konoe took out a flask from his drawstring bag and drank some water. Then he took some of the dried grass roots. He was thirsty, but he didn't feel very hungry. It was probably due to his anxiety. Konoe began to walk through the forest, carefully weaving through the fog after checking the position of the moon of light. How much further to Ransen? Moreover, Konoe wondered if his pursuer from Karou had entered the forest. As he continued onwards, he held these uneasy thoughts in the back of his mind. As he walked, Konoe marked the tree trunks with his claws. All too soon, the moon of light climbed just above him. He sighed a little and stopped. Suddenly, he felt a presence. Konoe's ears perked. Someone was there, and they were not alone. There was the sound of branches being tread on, and the sound of clothes rustling. The air vibrated, confirming a presence. 2, 3, maybe more. Maybe he was surrounded. They were watching him. Bandits. Several rough breaths overlapped and echoed through the trees. Perhaps the bandits that killed the person that pendant belonged to. Konoe backed up to a tree, lowering his stance and moving a hand down to the sword at his waist. Between the gaps of deep green, several shadows came into sight. Above them all, an especially large shadow shook with laughter. What's a youngster like you doing in this forest? It is real dangerous for guys or gals to be traveling alone. As if amused by those words, the surrounding shadows all laughed at once. Their coarse voices shook the plants. As the group of shadows glared at him, Konoe sorted out his thoughts. When he glanced around, he saw about 10 of them. He could take them on, but only if they attacked one by one. All the shadows were large, but they seemed to be quick too, so they had an advantage. Konoe felt something strange about the scene before him. Like maybe the shadows aren't real? Maybe? The shadows hiding in the trees crawled towards him little by little. Seeing the cats surrounding him, Konoe gasped. I made him gasp. They were definitely bandit cats. They squared their shoulders, eyes shining with laughter. But something was wrong. There was a strange, indescribable heat swirling around them. Instantly, the hair all over his body stood on end. Chills ran through him. This was bad. The signs of his empathy. He couldn't control it, and the feeling flowed smoothly into Konoe's heart, just like the tongue of a serpent. Suddenly, a ferocious torrent of emotions pierced the wall of his self-control and spread into his chest. His teeth clenched and his knees buckled. If he couldn't start breathing again, he'd die. Even as he thought this, the intense emotions rose. No, it was different. Something really was wrong. Many lights exploded in the backs of his eyes and disappeared. Intense delusions. Vivid images. Konoe didn't understand whose face it was, but it was warped with hatred. He was pulled into a vortex. The bandits surrounded Konoe, who'd collapsed, laughing their vulgar laughter. The density of the emotions increased, and his thoughts flickered violently over and over again. At that moment, a shadow flashed through Konoe's mind. It moved smoothly, meandering left and right. There were traces of glossy scales. It was a serpent, the green snake from his dream. He was thinking back to that now for some reason. There was something here, he thought. There was something here other than the bandits. But Konoe's thoughts were interrupted. Ugh! One of the bandits raised his axe and pounced at Konoe. He rolled to the side at once, evading the blow. The axe stuck into the ground. He heard a dull sound. Another blow swung at him from behind, and he jumped. Some of the hairs on his tail were cut as the axe bore into the ground. Another blow swung at him from behind. With no time to think, Konoe ran. Diving, he escaped the circle of the bandits' siege. Once they realized that their prey had disappeared, they slowly turned their bodies and faced Konoe's direction. And they're zombies. Their thirst for blood increased even more. Several low growls overlapped and crept across the earth. Konoe felt a strong pain as though their feelings of terrible anger were crushing his chest, like they were tearing him apart. In the corner of his mind, the snake undulated its body and laughed, its tongue flickering. His knees weakened as he desperately tried to endure it. If this kept up, he wouldn't be able to move. He swallowed the agony and ran to escape from the bandits. He dashed out of the way of the roughly plain stone sword, flashing across his view. Then, he kicked his heel at the chin of a bandit cat who had grabbed his tail. The cat moaned and growled behind him as Konoe ran as fast as he could. Where was he running? In the direction of the Moon of Light? There was no time to check. How far would the bandits chase him? Konoe's heart was beating so fast he thought it would explode. Konoe was much faster than they, but the anger he felt from the bandits pierced his chest painfully. For that reason, Konoe wasn't able to shake them off. He felt as though he had no strength. It took everything he had to evade their blows. His body was suddenly roughly pulled from behind. Something had grabbed his tail. That's just rude. He had to get out of there, but soon Konoe heard heavy breathing behind him. He was surely beginning to slow down. He felt a dull pain in his arm. The cat chasing him from behind had grazed him with his claws. The cat that had chased and grabbed Konoe recklessly lunged at him with his claws. He was barely able to evade the attack and was starting to run out of breath. Konoe didn't have time to draw his sword. His timing was spot on as he slipped past each blow. Konoe aimed for the short interval between the swinging of his opponent's arms to launch his own attacks. He turned his right foot and twisted his upper body, relying on the force of the drawn claws of his right hand. Yeah! His opponent cried out in anguish as a spray of deep red blood gushed from his face. Konoe's claws tore into his flesh from his eyes to his nose. The cat clutching his face disappeared from sight. He took a short rest for a moment, but other cats were still coming after him. With traces of blood still covering his right hand, Konoe sprinted off. The muscles of his legs ached and his feet hurt. His body ached in other places too, places he didn't even stop to consider. Still, he ran. His restless breathing echoed in the depths of his ears. As the wind swept past his cheeks, he immediately started to feel heavy. His feet staggered as he stepped heavily into the ground. A searing pain pierced his heart. Unable to control them, his feet became tangled. Konoe tripped over a raised tree root and fell on his side. As he tried to get up, he became alarmed. Konoe heard the sound of heavy breathing nearby. It wasn't from behind him. It was beside him. Bandit cats approached him from the trees, murderous smiles twisting their lips. One of them raised a stone axe, but then a shadow flew by, and the bandit fell as if he were blown back. Oh, hello. It felt like it was happening in slow motion. Screams rent the air one after another. Konoe stopped and looked behind him. The bandit cats behind him had fallen with their eyes rolled back in their heads. They convulsed as bloody froth emitted from their mouths. When he looked closer, he could see a straight red line sliced across their necks. One cat was going to attack Konoe from the right, but a long sword pierced their body. The figure that seemed to have jumped away was completely helpless. His tongue lolled out of his mouth. Then, suddenly, a single stream of blood trickled down. It felt like time had stopped. Standing in front of the dumbstruck and frozen Konoe was the back of a cat he had never seen before. He wasn't a bandit. He had long, silver-white hair, with small, rounded ears and a thick, bushy tail. He looked like he was a descendant from a line of large Ribika. In both hands, he wielded a sword, one of which was buried in the bandit's body. When the silver-haired cat drew his sword out of the body, he flicked the blood off it and slowly looked over his shoulder. A blue eye pierced through Konoe. His heart leapt. The silver-haired cat had only one eye. The other eye was covered by an eye patch. But when the moonlight shone through the foliage, that one eye still reflected a strong and quiet light. Instantly, Konoe forgot all about his vigilance. Silver hair swayed subtly in the breeze. Gaze at his beautiful face unintentionally. Konoe stared at the cat in front of his eyes as if he were eating into him. If he looked away, he'd admit the superiority of the other cat, a tacit rule among cats, though it didn't matter much now. He just felt strongly that he didn't want to look away. For a few seconds, their eyes matched wordlessly. A bandit's cry broke the impossibly long silence. The cat with the silver hair looked back immediately. There were many shadows following now from the path he'd come running down. The pain that faded away in Konoe's chest now came back again. He began to feel those empathic feelings again, tearing through his clothes. Konoe thought that he wouldn't be able to tolerate it any further. While he clenched his teeth in despair, the silver-haired cat began to rush forward. Go! The faint, low voice swept past Konoe's ears. Yes. Nailed it. He's got a low voice. Sometimes, I give characters voices that, don't match at all what's in the narration, and I feel like such a shit when I do that. A flash of silver passed, as if he were in a daydream. His white tail streaming behind him, the figure ran through the deep greenery and took on the bandits all on his own. Konoe watched the scene in utter amazement. The bandit cat in the lead cried out and threw himself on the silver-haired cat. Red blood spewed into the air. The bandit cat's body collapsed without a sound. He went on like he'd made up his mind about this from the beginning, without any doubt or hesitation. This unknown silver cat, just who was he? Above all that, why was he drawn to this swordsman? Konoe was attracted by something. Could be the strong jaw, the beautiful long white hair, the muscles. I don't know. But he shouldn't just be admiring him now. Go. It was certainly what that cat had said. Konoe turned around at once and began to run the other way. Konoe obeyed the words of the silver-haired cat as if he'd been enchanted. The pain of empathy still tormented Konoe's body. He held his breath. He wouldn't have been able to turn around if the bandits had caught up with him. Emotional empathy was a useless thing. Konoe felt hatred towards it from the bottom of his heart. The moon of light gleamed high on the sky. Konoe ran against the wind, deeper into the forest. In the meantime, the silver-haired cat didn't look back at Konoe as he ran, and raised his sword instead. His appearance wasn't fierce. Rather, he seemed to look indifferent. But the moment his sword sliced into flesh, there was definitely a small smile on his face. There was a muffled scream. Red lifeblood dripped to the ground. The green was dyed with flecks of vivid red. Whenever his silver hair fluttered, sprays of blood danced behind him, as if following his every movement. The bloody feast in the deep forest was interrupted. Only the silence in the air indicated its end.